Right. Good evening, folks. Welcome to the Monday night sip and sketch with yours truly, Brent Dodd. What we're going to be doing this evening is a step-by-step walk you through the process of creating an artwork by putting stick figures together. And we'll get going in about 5 minutes. We just want to show everyone that we're here, and they'll know where then to log on and give everyone a chance to get their things together. All you're going to need is a very simple Pilot fine liner. It's very exciting to see that so many of you, even across the ocean, have managed to get hold of these, and they come in a sneaky box. So you've got 10 of them, and that means that you're going to be with us for a little while. So here's hoping that the more and more you do this, the more and more exciting it gets in you being able to create an artwork. So a big shout out to Steve and Vicky that got themselves their box of Pilot fine liners this week, and they sent us a little picture of it, which was really quite cool. Okay, so with that, you'll also then need just a very simple, you can have a little top of water. You don't need a lot of water. And then the other thing you'll need is just a brush. It can be any type of brush. It could even be a brush that you paint the wall with, or just a normal, simple hog hair brush. You can also get the much nicer sable hair, which has got a fine tip to it, and plays with the ink really quite nicely. Okay, good. And now I just want to chat briefly about these two guys that I work with at school. These two pupils they're amazing, and they were very excited. I don't think they were absolutely sure whether this would be true, that I would give a shout out to them and said that I'd ask them to put their details down on the feed below. One of whom is Raj. He's a great kid, and he's got such a beautiful talent for drawing and whatnot. And his address on Instagram is Scurry Art 17. Scurry Art numeral 17, which I did ask him about, but I can't relay the details there. And then the second one is this chap that has got an extraordinary eye for photography. His ability to look at composition and light and those elements of art which are always successful, which are the depth, contrast, light and dark, color. His name is k.pile_photography. And I'll put those details in the feed underneath so that you can have a look at those later. And check them out. I think that one of the key things to do is always to just give somebody a little bit of a thumbs up. You like their work, it gives them some go. The other thing that happened some time ago was we were up in the northern province, and we were on the back of we were very lucky to go away for the weekend on this game lodge type thing, and we were in the back of the vehicle with a particular gentleman that was telling us these most fascinating stories. He was from England, and he said he was fascinated with birds, and we were busy birding, but we were talking about all sorts of other things, and had a common interest in types of movies and different books, and we just got on very, very well. And then he said that he was busy working on writing a book about robins, the bird robins. And we said to him, "Well, that's fascinating. That's so good, and that's so encouraging and good to hear. When it comes out, you must give us a shout, and we'll go out and we'll get a copy, because it's always good to help a writer, or a fellow artist." And anyway, when the evening came, and then we ended up in a riverbed together, and I was doing a bit of a live painting, and we continued chatting, and turns out his wife is also a great follower of the arts and enjoys a bit of painting. So there's a shout out this evening to you, Susan. And anyway, turns out Stephen Moss, this gentleman, sent us a couple of books the other day, because the artwork I did in the riverbed while we were working together, I sent it over to him. And he in turn sent us a little package back. Now, I love people that don't talk about themselves and are humble. Turns out, and I'm so glad Stephen's going to join us this evening. He said he'd join us. Turns out that Stephen is the author of The Blue Planet with David. And he's also done Dynasties, which is a phenomenal book. And those two, also with a bunch of other, he's a prolific writer. And Mrs. Moreau's Warbler, Birds, Do Birds Have Knees? A Sky Full of Starlings, that was a goodie. The Birding Life, This Birding Life. What a fascinating man. And anyway, he's going to join us this evening with his wife Susan, who's an artist as well. And it's exciting to have them with us. All right, so the whole point of this, if you're just joining us, is that we're going to take about 30 minutes to do a step-by-step idea of you can draw. All right, this is the art of being you. And it is about putting stick figures together in a step-by-step process that you will be able to ultimately create something. And let's get started. The past couple of weeks have been riddled with some angry faces, which I must apologize for. I think they came as a result of us perhaps taking on subject matter that was frustrating and complicated. And this does occasionally run out of focus, but it does come back. And give us a thumbs up if you're happy with the sound. And also, it's always very exciting to say hello to people from all over the world. So give us a shout out if you are from a place that is not here. And the nice thing is that we get to share this beautiful option of just making art. It's really important that we get the idea that it's very simple to make art, and through a step-by-step process, we will be able to do this. I'm going to zoom up a little bit, but I want to just give you an idea. This is the first time that we are actually doing a portrait scenario. We usually do landscape, which is the other way around. But this time, I just want to make sure that you have your pieces of paper in a vertical profile. I will zoom up a little bit now so that you can have a see. And the idea is that this is where the middle of the page would be here. The top would be there, halfway down on the right, halfway down on the left, and the center at the bottom here. The trick to drawing is always to see where things are compared to other things. So if I put something down the right-hand side here, it's always tricky if you then put it on the left-hand side, or you make a square. If I'm doing a circle, that tends to cause a little bit of havoc and angry faces. So we want to try and keep it as simple as possible and follow step by step. So less talk, more go. Let us start by 3/4 of the way up. So we've got 1/2, then we've got a quarter there, right before the top of the page. What we're going to do is we're going to just do a very nice simple line that can try and find its way horizontally across the page. And the idea with this, you get used to the pen, where if you press hard, you're going to get a darker line. And if you press lighter, you're going to get a lighter line. And that is just, you can run backwards and forwards. They're just trying to get a horizontal line going. And if it looks sort of similar to mine, you're on the right track. The key thing is not to look at the person next to you, because I don't know that they are more of an expert than you are. And it is really just supposed to be about having a little bit of fun. And so the more you scribble, the better this is ultimately going to turn out. Okay, so on the top of this little line, what we're going to do is we're going to, where there'd be halfway, let's go across to nearly 3/4 there. And in between that, we're going to just climb up. And what we're going to do is we're just going to wobble our way along. They're soft organic shapes at the top, like little cauliflowers. We're making a little forest at the back there. All right. And I don't want to give away the project that we're doing, because sometimes we think that, oh, good, that doesn't look like a forest, and I'm a terrible drawer. I'm just going to quit and go for a run instead. Well, you can't do that. You're in lockdown. And so we're going to have to just stick it out. And at the back there now, what we're going to do is we're going to wobble along again. This one's going to be a little bit straighter, though, with more delicate wobbles. All right, so depending on how stressful your day was, you might just be able to run your hand across and you'll get some really wicked little wobbles on its own. You'll see that it's very light. on the picture here, but you'll be able to see yours quite clearly. Okay, so those are our three main lines. And if you've got that sorted, really you can't actually go wrong from here onwards. You'll see I'm going to drop down a little bit on the right-hand side here. And what I'm going to do is try and make my mark go from there. We're going to go down all the way to the bottom left-hand side here, which is about a quarter of the way up. Right, and that's the important part, is that we want to try and see where the quarter of the way up is and to where that half. Because sometimes when you have lines going down, they tend to fall off the bottom of the page and we lose a little bit of this beautiful foreground area. And so when you're using your pen, you want to be able to see the whole time where are things going to start and where they're going to finish off. Okay, so let's look at, this is halfway. That's where our line was that we started with. You can pop down about from halfway to that line, about 2/3 the way up of that shape. And what we're going to do is we're going to go from there, and we're going to scribble our way to the left to start with. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sort of start curving down, and then as we're going to start curving off again to the left. So it's a little bit of an S shape, and you can squiggle your way down there. I'm using the pen very lightly, because it is sometimes possible that you make a mistake, but then you can just go over on top of it and squiggle. And that's the point, is you want to just scribble as much as you can. You see that's you see that's a straighter line there, and then it starts curving as it gets to the bottom here. All right, so it almost looks like you could be standing an aerial view on top of a beach perhaps. Okay, on top of that line now, if we have that space there, we've got these two spaces on the top here. In between, we cut that guy in half. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to try and copy this shape, but we're going to get further and further away from it as we come further down. As objects come towards you, they get bigger, they get closer, so we try and establish a sense of perspective. And what we're going to do as we come along here, I want you to try and get your mark making to come down, but the marks you're making, you're flicking up. So as you're coming along, you're flicking up as well. So you're creating a shape, but you're doing it by not having a continuous line. What you're doing is you're flicking up these grass shapes in order to create that top line shape. So we have the bottom line, which is more of a continuous dribble, and then we started with a little bit of a dribble at the top here, but then as we came down, we started breaking it up into these tiny little wicked shapes that flick up. So ultimately, boom, 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 we've got that grass in the foreground there. Nice, excellent. And those of you that are joining us again from last week, big shout out to all of you there in Esegardini. It's good to have you back. And a little quick question of whether you remember those three things that we were talking about regarding how to analyze an artwork, and talking about the art of life as well. Those content, form, and context. Okay, what we're going to do is start off in the same place again in that top line. The top one here, not the original top, this one of our bank here. We're going to come down, we slowly start separating again. We're on top of the line and we're starting to separate. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to separate even further. And again, we're going to start now coming out really and separating again. And now we continue to create another line like we just did. So as you get away from the right-hand side, coming down to the left-hand side, you're practicing the technique of starting at the bottom and then you flick up your brush and you're thinking, I'm creating a shape not by line, but by different mark making. And it gets an idea in your head that this is how we can perhaps see differently. Because we're really wanting to see in terms of light and dark. And each line that you make creates a shape. So the more you can convey by doing less, the better it's going to ultimately end up looking. Let's sneak on to the right-hand side here now. Now what we're going to do is, we are so good at doing that now, we're going to come down and do, from that bottom mark that you started there, what we're going to do is follow it to start with, but you're immediately going to start with your little flicks, by tiny little guys that we're just flicking up there. We're following that line. Now we can break away, and what we're doing is we're just flicking out to the left. Let's say that we're flicking out to the left, and I'm just coming along, coming down, and then I'm going to spit out into the center here. Spit as in a piece of land that sneaks out. All right, not an expectoration, but a little edge of land there that comes out, and then we come back in again, and then now we look at these this could be some taller mark making. So we've gone into 3 different ways of doing stuff there. We've got now taller ones. So we started out with the little flickies at the top there, tiny little guys that are flicking out, starting at the bottom and flicking out upwards. So as your pen leaves the surface, it creates some lovely sharp edges there. And it comes out to the spit there where we have little flicks up. And then we come back in towards the right-hand side. And as you come into the right-hand side, there comes into the inside, and then he moves down again. And as you move down and out, you start creating more of a gentle split. And as it does that as well, you can get your pen to flick more and more and more. And you then really start getting some lovely flicks as if there's to be wool rushes on the right-hand side. You start in the center, and you flick out, and you flick up. The more random and scribbly it is, the better and more exciting this is going to be. So you keep flicking as you're coming out. We're just coming out in a very gentle area here, coming down to the bottom middle part there. And as we get to the front there, it comes back on the inside. And on the inside, we're coming back into the right-hand side now, coming down to the bottom corner. There we go. Now we're really flicking, and we're going for the finish down the bottom here. And it is flicking up really quite excitingly. A lot of chaos there happening down the bottom. And we dribble over the finish there. So there we go. We get a little bit of excitement happening down the bottom there. Here we carry away. All right, so there we go. So this energy that starts happening down the bottom here is really quite exciting. You end up, the pen can sometimes leave and then catch again, so you get the tops of those bulrushes perhaps that are happening. And then you then are able to fill this in on the right-hand side. This is really quite exciting because you cannot get a scribble wrong. And let's scribble, 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 scribble. Let's just scribble that in. Try and make your scribbles more vertical than horizontal, because we want to pretend that this is relaxed, real grassy territory here that you would have to really dig into and step into. But the more scribbly you get, the more exciting that territory can become. And then just at the bottom here, underneath this now, you've enjoyed that scribbling. Don't forget that the panic that usually onsets with the sympathetic nervous system creates a little bit of dry mouth. So don't forget to have a little sip of your juice and enjoy this process of just simply making, because you cannot get it wrong. There's very little in life these days that you cannot get wrong. So this is one of those things. We're going to scribble along the bottom here, and I'll really give it you can press your pen a little bit harder, and you will get that to just create a little bit of a sharper, darker edge there. So we're creating a little bit of what is called form. So we create the darkness up the bottom there, and as it comes down, it creates this idea that perhaps there's some shadow underneath there. Okay, so we're doing really well here. We're making good progress, and already there's no fear of needing to draw bridges or anything like that. We are making good progress. On the right-hand side, now this is really quite exciting. Because you're so good at this on the right-hand side, we're going to go onto the left-hand side here, and we can do the exact same thing, but just a little bit smaller. He's a bit further away than these guys on the right-hand side here. So you want to be able to just give it a little bit more of a relaxed, to get focused in there. So you've got it big in there, going straight upwards, right, and then a little bit to the side, but you're starting at the bottom and you're flicking up, and you just keep going along, but then you can vary it. Now you want to ask yourself, are the tops of this line that's going on there, is it all the same? Have I got a generic thing going on? You want to be random, all right? It's if you remember back to somebody coming and say, you are so random. Well, random really is just another word for somebody calls you so as an arbitrary. That means random, doesn't make any sense at all. You want to avoid being geometrical. If somebody says to you, you're so arbitrary, you say, well, thank you very much. It's really quite exciting to be different. And that is the whole point, is you want to make this little journey along the top here not all the same. You want to be able to come down and be totally random and celebrate your difference and really be quite exciting. There we go. And the whole rule is that if you can be kind, you will find there is no end to the glory that comes from that. You see these little, if you want to bring up some little lines that are coming up from the left-hand side, you are scribbling up. You want to go up in a sort of gentle angle. You're breaking up that line by scribbling up, and you're going up to meet your other line. But it is going up in a left 9:30, 10 o'clock degree, 45-degree angle from the bottom right up to the top left. You're going to sort of be squiggling up there, and you eventually get to meet that. And so then you get the thing. But how do we make it look like it's coming round and towards us? Well, we just try and make like we did the bottom here. We want to try and make the foreground a little bit darker here. So we are going to use longer lines, but I'm keeping my pen on the page and I'm just scribbling up and down there. Because we get the general idea that that wire wool at the front here is giving us that form. So we see this beautiful light that's sitting on top of this face here, and then it curves around to the sides on both sides. We get that beautiful form. And a sense of travel going all the way to the other side there. Okay, and so if you're having a look at the person's drawing next to you and you can simulate a scenario in life that we've been seeing recently all over the world, if it is different to yours, just say, wow, that's looking really quite nice, because we need to celebrate our difference. And if you've got nothing nice to say, then perhaps just don't say it at all. That's always a great rule. I've found that to be very useful throughout life, and a great tribute to. Very proud to have amazing parents that always said, if you don't have anything nice to say, then really don't say it. If you're going to be mean, then at least make it constructive. So I have really appreciated all the constructive criticism that we've got on the page recently. We can't hear you, and you're really quite rubbish. That's allowed me to get up a lot earlier and to keep practicing. So I want to thank you for that advice, and it's as I said, it's beautifully constructive. As we come forward onto this little split that we started with on the right-hand side here, what we can do, in order to make sure that we can create some more depth by going over there, what we're going to do is we can continue that line by just continuing to flick it up there. All right, and so that we finish off that idea that you can see that might be a little bit of a little hill that goes over into another gully there. And then you can do that again by taking a little gap there and just doing another tiny version of that on the other side there. Oh, that's looking wicked. There we go. Oh, we're getting a lovely sense of travel there. And it's also not in the same angle. We've got to being a little bit steeper there. So there we go. There we go. Suzanne, I hope you're enjoying this new introduction to a different type of art. All right. Now, if we were to follow this line here, this one on the top left-hand side, you take a break from that right-hand side. You can come back and fiddle with that if you need to. But let's have a look at the other side here. We're going to use some lines that will perhaps show us how we can go from a horizontal straight into a vertical. And this is wicked, where you're able to come along with just some vertical lines. And you're just going to do some vertical lines like that. If we put some vertical lines in there, I've just gone with some vertical lines, and I've come above my spit on the end there, that little spike going out. Just above that, I've got just straight vertical lines that are filling up that gap. Straight vertical lines, and then I've taken a little bit of a gap. All right, then I'm going to come around the corner here, and then I'm just going to continue again. Some vertical lines there, and then I can just fizzle them out. Because what we're going to do is be able to get a sense that, and we bring them in again at the bottom here, these vertical lines. What they're going to do is just give us a sensation that this is a vertical space here. It's dropping off and dropping down into our little space there. And you can, it's a continuous vertical and just off vertical shape. We can scribble that in. And what that does is it says, oh, you know what, there's suddenly, we've got a dark area, and then it bounces out and the light is catching that little mound as it hits down towards the surface there. And then the idea is that by doing that vertical, we just scribble away there. But the nice thing is to leave a little gap, and then a little gap again, and then as we disappear into the background there, it is nice and simple. And so you can have a look there. Oh, that's looking wonderful. All right. But on the top here, have a good scribble there. Have a good scribble. All right. And then let's top it off now. Let's go right onto the top there. And what we're going to have to do is show that there's also a little bit of grass on the top here. That's just top. We have to really get a move on now. We've been doing this for 20 minutes. And we're going to now run a couple of little drifts on the top there, just to show that we've come off the top, dropped into a steeper, and then bobbled over into the bottom here. Now on top of that, let's bring a little path in here. So we're going to have a solid line come down, and it follows from, it breaks away from our top line, and comes, separates, moves away almost horizontally, then curves down and off the page there. So you can see that it is following from the top right hand side. It's going to just come down, and then it eases off on the side there. Now, in order to make it a path, we're going to do the same thing again. As it comes towards you, it's going to separate. As it comes towards you, it gets wider, and then as it goes away from you, it gets thinner again. All right, so you can have your path coming down and then further away. So as the path comes down towards you, comes down to you, and then as the path separates, it goes on the other side. So you can have those lines that they sort of separate and then come back towards each other. And the thing is, that identifies itself as being a totally different mark making to the rest of the marks that you've been using. So we immediately see that it's a different story. It's a totally different story that's being told, and it's probably geometric, meaning that it's probably man-made and different to what we've seen here. And so then the brain will fill it in and say, oh, that's probably a nice little path there. But if we're struggling, and the brain's not really doing that, let's give it a little bit more information, just to end off here. At the top of this here, we've got this lovely gap here. And if we were to take 2/3 of it and come down to the bottom third, let's give ourselves some information there. We're going to start a little base, a little horizontal base about the width of 2 pens. And we are going to start by wiggling our way up to the right and then flicking off. Now, you cannot get this wrong. However, you don't want it to be like a snake. You want it to pretend that this is an old tree that's found its way up over the winters. It's climbed up, and now you're going to join it again by a line that's going next to it, getting thinner and thinner and thinner until eventually it joins itself at the top there. All right, so we're doing a double line there. And the idea is that your tree isn't going in a little meandering curve. What it does is, let's bring another branch in on the left-hand side here. It'll probably go up, and then it's probably taken a knock, and then it's going out, flicks, and then flicks again, and then flicks off. So it's got some lovely geometry to it and squiggliness. And again, from the inside, so we create a little V at the bottom there. Let's run a line in again and closer and closer and closer and closer and closer until eventually you get to the top. Let's do another little flick off. So as you go in, you're able to create, as you get to the top, you get a little flick off. And whilst you're there, you can flick off again and flick off again and flick off again. So you're just throwing in all this beautiful, and that's something I learned from an extraordinary, world-renowned artist by the name of Larry Norton. A great privilege to be able to have watched him over the years, right from when he came and joined us at school and gave us a program. I was 14 or 15, and this God arrived, Larry Norton, and he brought all his paintings from his studio, and he walked us through how to go about things. And this is something I remember right from back then, where he said, you take something out, and then it is always random. It'll flick up, and then it'll drop off, and it's awesome to be, it's a horrible word, it's magical to be able to see how you are totally at your own imagination and being able to bring this stuff to life. So let's go again from the bottom. Let's take another line up and come out to the right-hand side and create some more information. And then take another line next to it, so it's following it, and then getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And then flick and flick and flick and flick. And you're creating now more of a lattice at the top here. All right, and then whilst you're there, let's do a little bit of a scribble in of those. You can just do it straight. We're not going to get any detail in here. What we're going to do is just try and color it in. So literally hand on the page, and don't take it off. You just scribble your way all the way through that. You can do it horizontally, vertically, it doesn't really matter. If you had the time, you'd perhaps do little curved shapes, because those would show that that's the curved nature of the stem. You know what, let's put in another one there, because I know Vicky will be like, there's actually 4 little stems going up there, and that gave it away a little bit, and that this is a fabulous reference that we got from our very, very, very good partners in crime across the pond. Steve and Vicky, that sent us this image today. It's one of their favorite places, and I'd love to encourage you to please send your images through, because I'd love to be able to do something that is very special to you on an evening. And so we've got these lines coming out, so we've created our little, but we need to make sure that we've got enough of latticing up the top there. So you can just give yourself a little bit more by going up, and this is I'm not familiar with, and might have to get Vicky and Steve to give us some more information on what type of tree this is. I'm not sure what the trees are on that side of the world, but it's got a lovely way of climbing up and sort of spreading out with those thinner wintry leaves. And I haven't done it justice. It is definitely more of a straight wispy tree, and I've made it into a bare version. But at the same time, it serves the purpose of identifying that is on the left-hand side. And what we're going to do from there now is we've got to show, by colouring in our little background forest that we originally started with, we are able to create this background area then, and things then start to shine up. Don't worry about that gap in the middle there, but we've really got to get a move on now. We've got 4 minutes to go in order to be able to finish this off. In order to fill the space in here, we need to show, this is going to be like a sort of agrarian based thing here, where we've got these lines coming off towards you. Behind our tree, we get them coming towards us, and down. So it flares out from the top there, where your lines would be almost horizontal with the lines that you did. Nice, closely packed together, guys. Nice, close. But as you start coming further away, the lines get further apart as they come towards you, and eventually they're coming straight towards you. And so what that does is it just allows us to have a nice flat area that's going to contrast the scribbles around that. Now this tree looks like it might be floating, so you want to then, again, let's give a little bit of a scribble around the bottom of it, because that will allow it to be part of the field. The field comes round and it's got a little bit of a ploughed feel to it before it disappears up into the top there. Now we've really got a race now, in that there is something that's got to happen down here, and we've got to really create a beautiful sense of a little brook, a little stream that's running here. In order to show the flat surface of it, there's a lovely trick where you can just go very lightly with your pen gaps, but they're horizontal lines, and they are just going to have random starting points. But in this little gully here on the right hand side, we want to be able to create a horizontal line. Our beautiful Bella is doing tap dancing. So these are little flat horizontal lines. It's meant to be horizontal, absolutely horizontal there. And then as we come also onto the left-hand side here, you want to be able to again have little horizontals close together there. These are little horizontals, really nice and close on the edge there. And then as we come into the center area here, we have nice longer horizontals. Okay, and what that's going to do is just trying to establish a little bit of territory in terms of what have we got here, what is this space. And we want to create ink that is going to be a shadow area. Right, ink that's going to be a shadow area, so maybe because this is going to end up as water. You want to be able to say, this is going to be dark water. How do I, in the space of 30 minutes where I've stopped here at the edge of the stream, having a picnic, it's a beautiful day, how do I take care of water where there's dark area just with a pen and a brush? And what we want to do is get some ink on the page, but at the same time also use a line to show form. Okay, so we've gone horizontally there, and then we've left a gap as it comes back to light in the foreground. Now to change that even more, let's give us some more information by saying, you know what, let's put a couple of rocks in here which are flat bases, and I'm going to tickle that in. All right, so that shape would be a horizontal base, and then it's got a geometric top to it. All right, so it might have a geometric top, and then what you do is you can just scribble it in. And then behind that, you put another geometric shape next to it, and then you can shade it in. You want to leave a little bit of light between the two so that you can see them. And so we're going to fill in a couple little of these geometric shapes here in the pond. For the last minute and a half, we want to really get going here. Let's just fill in a couple of these and really quite tight together, and then a little one next to it. So very randomly now, because you're confident enough just to make sure all they just need to be is make sure that they've got a flat bottom and randomly placed, and you get some tiny ones maybe. And we're coming to fill this space right up into the foreground here. So we've got a nice variety that's gone from little rocks that are just touching the surface. Okay, now once you've put those in, and I've drawn them really quite quickly there, you don't want to spend too much time. All you need to make sure is that the bottom has got flat rock, flat bases to it, and the top has got a little bit of a geometric to it. And again, you please make sure you just want to avoid them being round, 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 round. You want to give them all a little bit of character. As you come further forward, then you've got these little snake shapes that you can put in here, little snake shapes that again are showing that we may have a couple of sort of ripple shapes in the foreground here where the water is beginning to speed up, maybe speeding up as it hits towards these rocks here. So the whole point of this idea is that you're using different mark making in order to be able to get different effects. So we've got the flat there, flat on the left hand side, then we've got dark shapes, and then an in between where we've got a wobble. It creates a bit of rhythm before it flattens out and quietens down. And so that, we've run out of time. We could have put a really nice big tree in here, but let's see how we go with time. Let us switch now to our brush. Okay, let's switch down to the brush. Let me see if we can just zoom out there a little bit. You should be able to see the bottom where I was just scribbling away there. All right, there we've got these little scribbles on the bottom here. All right, and so from there, we look now. If this is your first time, we're just looking for a little bottle, a little dab of water. You don't want too much water on the brush, and you think, if this is your first time, you want to just see how this works. And so let's start in the background here by just going in that flat area that we didn't do much with, and you let your brush touch the top and let the bottom of the brush touch the bottom. And you'll find that it'll allow it looks a little bit shiny on the screen here, but you will see that it'll get that to be a lovely subtle blend of both of those lines. Now if you jump immediately further forward into where you are going behind that tree, that forest there now ends up being a little bit darker. And the technique, if you remember, working with forest, you want to give it more of a dab. And by dabbing it, it gives it a little bit more information. All right, and with those dabs, you can then continue across into the area that you've just done, and you can throw a little bit more information into there as well. That's a sneaky little trick where you're picking up a little bit of ink on the left-hand side there, and it allows for you to have, you'll see on the left-hand side, we've picked up a little bit of that ink, and then I've just gone into the middle here, and I've just created a couple of darker shapes there, just by picking it without having to actually do any drawing. Okay, and then whilst you're there, you are wanting to be able to now run horizontally, but the trick is you want to avoid obliteration. I had a lovely message from Claudine this week where she wasn't able to do it at the time, but then looked back and started going with it, and then fell into the trap of obliteration, where she said it's terrible, where you just get going with this water and you just want to create this lovely blend of color, when actually you've got to be very careful of making sure that you leave light in between the marks that you're making. All right, so it's so important that you leave light in between your shapes. Okay, so we've come all the way forward now. Let's run along our path. So we're going to start our little path there. We're going to run along our path. On either side of the path you can do this ink, and you want to leave the little gaps that you made to be white and light, because that will then create a bit of contrast. Now the way that you're going on either side of this path now, you can flick up, and this is where it's going to be important for you to get the knack of this. Whatever brush you've got, you want to get used to the opportunity of getting something for nothing. which is if you flick with the ink that you've got, you can create beautiful texture there by just flicking it up on top of ink that you've put on. You didn't actually draw any grass there, but by flicking it up, you get the opportunity to create a bit of texture in those fields as they disappear there. Oh, there's some lovely texture that might be coming out of there. I put some potatoes into the ground 76 days ago, and I took them out 2 days ago, and they were half the size that I did, and I put them in. So I'm picturing these as imaginary potato. I had a lot of faith as well, but I always did something very wrong. But anyway, our tomatoes are looking good, and we're about to get some peppers as well, planted right at the beginning there. Let's come further forward again, and where we've got our verticals here, we can just run our brush over. You're going to be very careful not to obliterate that. You're going to have very little chance to work into that, and then off the top of that, whilst you've got a chance, take that water that you've got and flick it up there. Give us a nice little vertical texture to that, and you catch a little bit of light. Remember, this at the top here, you just want to speckle the surface. Use the tiny tips of the brush just to speckle the surface there so that you get that contrast. You want to look for the absolute variety that you can possibly get for the mark that you've been making. So we've just touched the surface there. We've got those little tickles of the surface. Let's run down again from where we started, and we can run along here. It's very easy to color in our dark there in the base, because from the dark you can always work up into the light and be in control of it. So that bottom part we're flicking up, and then we can just tickle our way up into the areas there. Alright, so there we go. Where we did decide to break up that geometric shape, we went in with some more random shapes, and then I've got a very, very dry brush now. It's only got a little bit of water left on it. So by scribbling away on the front here, it's picking up just a different texture thing. And that's something that comes with a little bit of practice and a little bit of time. You get used to what your brush can and cannot do, and allows you to develop a little bit of freedom. Now you see we've got that length. It drops down, creates bigger and bigger shapes as we come into the foreground. Let's swap onto the other side there now. Now we've got too much water on our brush, so let's look at where it's easier to do. Let's zoom out and look at this foreground area here, where we can put the water on and get rid of a lot of that water. We can flick out with quite a bit of an aggression. Remember to leave the light in between your shapes. You can just have raw pen, and what that does is it allows it to have a nice bit of texture. Then just on the top here, as we start running out of water, this is where the brush can keep its detail. You're not obliterating anything there. You're just sneaking in with the tips of the brush. You've run out of water now on that brush, but you're able to just still get it to create something, some magic at the top there. Alright, so we're totally in control of that shape now as well. Then we come now into this beautiful area where let's grab a little bit of water, and we're going to try and have the full face of the brush. So I'm not pointing it. I want to try and get as much coverage for as little work as possible. And I'm just going horizontally there. Alright, so horizontally first, and then I'm going to come down, more water on the brush again, and I'm going to come down here as well. Let's go horizontally here, coloring that in there. Alright, and whilst I've got that, I want to be able to just do a couple of verticals whilst that is still wet. You can get a couple of those verticals coming down. You've picked up a little bit of that ink there, and it comes down vertically. Same on the left hand side here. You can pick up a couple of those verticals, and it drops it down. Right, so you get that cross hatching, and as long as they are vertical and horizontal, you'll be able to get away with it being little reflections. The same here. If you want to come, you can leave a little bit of a white gap there, and you can drop down. If you leave a little bit of a gap between your bank, you can pick up some ink, leave a little gap, and then just have some verticals. The idea of leaving a gap, let's try it down here. Let's show you down the bottom here. If you want to pick up some of this ink here and then leave a gap and fill in and then do some verticals, what that does is it just shows that there's a break between your land area and where it sparkles and then becomes a reflection. So just make sure that you keep that as a sneaky little trick. Always have that silver lining of your bank before you hit your water. And in this water here, just remember you want to just do straight verticals in that area there, and then sneak out 1 or 2 horizontals. And what that'll do is allow you to have a nice variety going there. Obviously, with your little pebbles here, we can just dribble on top of those pebbles, make them some nice little dark colors. The nice thing about those, you can also just do a sneaky little drop down off of them to give them a shadow. If you had the time, you'd leave a little gap and then do a little dribble, little gap and then a little dribble down. And you can obviously then run your brush to the side here and get some little ripples going with your brush on the left hand side. You're running those little ripples through the water there. And again, the little ripples off the right hand side. You can run these little ripples off. And that is pretty much good to go. We've just left our... Let's move on there. Let's not drag too much or do too much of that reflection work, because you can ruin it by overdoing it. Let's run our brushes up into this tree here. Just finish off. We've got this lovely little tree that's finishing off here. We're just colouring in our ink. So it's a nice dark statement up the top. Almost becomes a sort of subtle subject matter. And you see the way that I'm using my brush. I'm dragging it. So it's a limp wrist that is able to just drag. And you're letting the brush literally just dangle in your fingers, and you're allowing that to do the work. It's just dragging a little bit of that water onto the surface, and it creates a beautiful little bit of randomness that goes, and it's picking up. I'm not following over the details of my marks that I'll be making, because they also are going to create their own little bit of information. I'm talking about the tops here. The bottoms I've definitely followed along, but as we've got up, we've allowed it to be a little bit more crazy and give it a bit of a lovely haircut there on the top. Now what I would have done is, if we had had more time, I would definitely have looked to create something that came on the right hand side. So we've got this dark shape on the left hand side, but what is really exciting is that you can create... just create a little bit of a dark. We lost a little bit of that, my enthusiastic shading here. We've lost a little bit of our bank there. But what you can do is, like, there is this big tree on the left. I wanted to suggest that what you can do is you can run a smaller line of a tree that goes up and crosses off over the horizon now, and then another thin one next to it. Very thin line next to it. There we go. Because what that's going to do now is allow us to then have a little branch. And you can just watch this for now. Don't worry about doing it. You can watch it as it comes off, a thin little one, and then it flicks off at the end here. And then what you can do also is it then has these branches that come off to the right. And I'm going to get it to come off like that, and then another one off here. And so I'm creating a balance by going out, but then it's also coming in and flicking over. Alright, so we have these things that flick over and down and randomly like that. So we have that, because what that then does is, and I'm going to come in here very quickly and just do a scribble. And you can choose to put this in, should you wish to. So what it does is it just creates again another element that allows you to add variety. So it's creating more variety. All right, and I'm really scribbling in here quite quickly, because that's really what it's about. Just try and scribble. Keep a little bit of structure. And so what that's doing is, oh yeah, that's actually looking really nice. It allows you to have just a bit of variety then. It's just scribble in that bottom part as well there. And if you haven't got the more than 160 gram paper, you may find that you'll start eating through the paper, and you've got to be careful of that if you put too much water on. Let's give that a bit of a heavier base at the bottom. I'm really going to scribble in there to give it a bit more of a structure at the bottom. And that's really quite interesting in that as it flicks up, we've got to make something for a little kingfisher or a hammerkop at the top there, something for it to sit on. So a variety of branch that comes up, goes up off it perpendicular, and then drops down there and then flicks off. And those are really quite fun. You see the way the metacarpals come out there and they just go flip. They have little seizure there, and then so we get that to be a contrast to the one that is happening on the left hand side here. There's a beautiful strength that takes it right up the foreground in contrast to the one that we had on the left. And there you go. We've got a very simple little landscape. And again, a big thank you to Steve and Vicky for sending that image through. Got some lovely little ripples and a quiet scene going up for a great week that hopefully we spread the word of just being kind, and we can look forward to some more peaceful times in the future where maybe if more people did art and just relaxed and were kind, we would maybe get a little bit of clarity in the world. Alright, so there we go. Nice. I've just pulled in a little bit more dark there. I'm breaking my own rule here and fiddling when actually it should be downtime now. There, I've got that just a little bit more. I needed a bit more contrast on the left hand side there. Alright folks, so please, will you please send us pictures of your work. Take a little snapshot and attach it and send it to us so we can have a look, and then we'll compile something. When we get to 12, we can create a little calendar. And there's there. So what we'll do is we'll hopefully see you again, same time next week. Have a great, fantastic end to the beginning of your week. Thanks for joining us.